The sun was slowly setting over the city, painting the skyscrapers in shades of orange and pink, when I found myself standing before the enormous window of my luxurious apartment. The view was breathtaking, but the beauty stretching before me couldn't dispel the darkness that nestled in my heart. Richard Montgomery, a name that echoed in high society circles, a successful millionaire surrounded by material wealth and prestige, yet at that moment, all I felt was an overwhelming emptiness. Loneliness was my only companion. Gazing at the vibrant city outside, I felt like a distant spectator, a ghost wandering through the hallways of a past filled with laughter and love. The echo of my wife Eleanor's presence still reverberated within the cold walls of the apartment. She was the light that illuminated every corner of my being, the force that propelled me to face life's challenges. Since her passing, a shadow had taken over my world, transforming everything into a dark and drab place. Memories of her flooded my mind like a relentless wave that wouldn't let me be. I remembered the scent of her perfume, the sound of her laughter, and how she could brighten even the darkest days. Her absence was a weight I carried in my chest, and with each passing day, the burden felt heavier. I had locked myself in a cycle of work and solitude, avoiding any human contact, as if isolating myself would somehow lessen the pain of my loss. As I observed the bustling city, I realized that others seemed so full of life, laughing, embracing, sharing moments of happiness. A family with children running through the park, couples in love exchanging knowing glances, all felt so distant from me. I felt like an intruder in my own world, incapable of connecting with the reality around me. The voices and laughter became indistinct noise, as if someone had turned the volume down on life, and I was trapped in a deafening silence. In that moment of despair, something within me cried out for change. The idea of escaping that oppressive loneliness drove me to act impulsively. I needed to do something that would pull me out of the stupor I was in. What did I want? It was a question I couldn't answer. A breath of life, perhaps. A glimpse of happiness. When my eyes landed on a nearby park, an insane idea began to form in my mind. Why not? Why not try something completely out of the ordinary? I quickly dressed, the designer clothes almost suffocating me at that moment. The image of a successful man, a millionaire in a tailored suit, contrasted sharply with the image of a man tormented by his own pain. Upon leaving the apartment, I descended the building stairs, and as I stepped onto the city sidewalks, I was enveloped by a fresh breeze that seemed to whisper promises of change. With each step, adrenaline surged through my veins, and suddenly, I found myself walking toward the park, unsure of what I expected to find. The park was an oasis amid the concrete jungle of the city. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and the laughter of children echoed across the grassy areas. As I approached, I saw a small figure sitting on a bench, observing the world around her. It was a girl, seemingly no more than 10 years old, dressed in tattered clothes, her gaze still sparkling with a hint of hope despite her struggles. She was a homeless child, but something about her captivated me, prompting me to stop for a moment and reflect. She watched the families playing, her eyes alternating between admiration and sorrow. I could see, in her eyes, a yearning for something that seemed so distant, so out of reach. It reminded me of how I used to look at the world with curious eyes, just like hers, before I became lost in a life of obligations and sadness. The idea that had sprouted in my mind solidified. I didn't just want to help, I wanted an escape, even if temporary, from the life I was leading. When I approached her, my heart raced. I knew that what I was about to do was insane, but the loneliness that enveloped me was even more unbearable. I decided she could be the key to a new experience. Why not pretend she's my daughter for a day? I thought. It was a crazy idea, but the possibility intrigued me. I needed a connection, something to make me feel alive again. As I neared her, I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. She looked at me with a confused expression, but there was something in her gaze that told me she was open to possibilities. What I was about to propose could change our lives, even if just for a few hours. I didn't know how she would react, but the thought of experiencing a new way of life, even if temporarily, was too tempting to resist. A day. Just one day where we could pretend to be a family, where the pain of loneliness didn't exist. The idea was absurd, but the need to feel alive, to connect with another person, outweighed any logic. The little girl looked at me, and in that moment, I saw a glimmer of hope. It was as if, for a brief moment, we could create a world where pain didn't exist, where sadness wouldn't reach us. And so, not knowing what the future held, I made the proposal. What could go wrong? After all, life was about taking risks, and I was willing to take one. The city continued to pulse around us, and I knew we were about to embark on a journey that, regardless of what happened, would change our lives forever. I had no idea that this insane decision would lead me to discover not only the essence of friendship but also the true meaning of family. The sun began to set, casting a golden light over the city, as Lily and I walked together through the bustling streets. The air was filled with the sweet smell of popcorn vendors and the intense aroma of street food. Life pulsed all around us, but at that moment, something began to change inside me. The presence of that little girl, with her curious gaze and carefree spirit, seemed to breathe life into a heart that had long been dormant. Lily looked at the people passing by, her eyes shining like stars. There was an innocence in her that I had lost so long ago. I watched her as she pointed at a family walking by, with children laughing and playing. A sparkle of admiration lit up her face, making me reflect on what truly mattered. The life I had built, surrounded by wealth and loneliness, felt so empty compared to the simplicity of joy that those children shared. As we walked, Lily stopped in front of a toy store. The shelves were filled with vibrant colors, dolls, cars, and games. She pressed her nose against the glass, fascinated. The purity of her desire for something so simple made my heart ache. I remembered when my wife and I used to stroll through here, and she always insisted on going into shops like this, excited to see the new arrivals. Now, everything felt so distant, as if I were looking at a life that no longer belonged to me. I decided to go into the store, and the bell tinkled above the door, causing Lily to turn around, her eyes wide with wonder. I wanted to give her something, even if just a small gesture. We walked through the aisles, and I watched her try to touch the toys, as if her fingers were connected to a world of dreams. I bought a small doll, one that looked like it had come straight out of a fairy tale. When I handed it to her, the smile that lit up her face brought me a joy I hadn't felt in years. It was as if those few moments were an antidote to the pain I carried. After that, we decided to stop at a nearby park. The park was full of children running around, couples enjoying themselves, and groups of friends sitting at tables, sharing laughter. I sat on a bench while Lily began to play in the grass, mimicking the gestures of a little girl playing with a dog. It was incredible how, in just a few minutes, she had transformed from a beggar into a free-spirited child, full of life and worries. Sitting there, watching her play, I began to relax. The anguish I had carried seemed to dissolve. Lily had this ability to make me feel alive again. Each of her laughs was like a cool breeze on a hot summer day, and I wanted to hold on to that moment forever. She ran, fell, and got back up, with an indomitable spirit that reminded me of how I used to be before pain consumed me. As the sun started to set on the horizon, we decided to visit a nearby museum. I knew she had never seen one before. The idea of showing her a piece of the world that I cherished so much filled me with anticipation. Upon entering, the fresh air and the smell of paint and wood enveloped me. The walls were adorned with masterpieces, each telling a different story. Lily fell silent, her eyes scanning the paintings with an admiration I had never seen before. She seemed to enter each artwork, imagining the worlds that existed behind the colors. Her innocence was like a lens that made everything more beautiful and vibrant. As I watched her reaction, a wave of nostalgia hit me. I remembered how my wife used to take me to museums, and how we would lose ourselves in conversations about art and life. As we walked, I saw a painting of a flower-filled field, with colors so vivid they almost leapt off the canvas. Lily stopped in front of it, her gaze fixed and her mouth agape in wonder. I observed her, fascinated. It was as if she was seeing something I had lost along the years, the ability to see beauty in the little things, the ability to dream. In that moment, I realized that despite all the hardships she faced, Lily possessed an inner richness that I had long forgotten. She didn't need much to be happy. That little doll I had given her and the sight of the artworks made her sparkle with joy. I, on the other hand, had allowed myself to be consumed by pain and loneliness, forgetting how simple it was to find pleasure in the small things. The museum was a magical place, and I let myself be carried away by that atmosphere. While Lily explored every corner, I got lost in my own thoughts. I began to reflect on the life I was leading, about how I had imprisoned myself in my own luxury and solitude. Here was a little girl who had nothing, yet shone brighter than any of the paintings we were admiring. Finally, as we left the museum, we went to an upscale restaurant I used to frequent. The ambience was sophisticated, with soft lights and music in the background. The tables were elegantly set, and the waiters moved with the grace of dancers. I hesitated for a moment. What would people say if they saw us together? A millionaire and a beggar? But as soon as I looked at Lily, I knew it was what I wanted. Her presence made me feel as if I was truly living again. We sat at the table, and I noticed she was a bit nervous, looking around with wide eyes. With each dish that arrived, she became more impressed. I ordered a simple meal, but her happiness at trying new flavors was priceless. She watched every move the waiters made, admiring the efficiency with which they served the patrons. In the midst of the meal, something within me began to transform. Seeing her joy made me realize that this wasn't just a facade. It wasn't merely a day of fun. That friendship was healing me. Each laugh, each glance, each shared moment reminded me of who I really was. The pain and loneliness that had consumed me were dissipating, giving way to new hope. Lily's presence made me feel alive again, as if life was giving me a second chance. When dinner came to an end, I asked for the check, and while I waited, I looked at Lily. Her expression was pure happiness, and an overwhelming wave of emotion washed over me. I wasn't just providing her with a different day, she was giving me my life back. The weight of loneliness that I had carried for so long seemed to have disappeared, even if just temporarily. As we left the restaurant, the city was lit up. The bright lights contrasted with the darkness of the night, and the atmosphere was magical. We walked side by side, and I noticed how everything around us seemed more vibrant. Lily hopped along the sidewalks, pulling me to keep up with her joyful rhythm. With each step, she taught me that life was made up of little moments, and those moments were precious. The night was just beginning, and I knew that day would change our lives forever. The friendship forming between us was more than just a mere facade, it was a deep connection that reminded me of what truly mattered. Looking at Lily, I realized she was not just a beggar. She was a light in my life, a reminder that love and hope still existed, even in the most challenging situations. In the days that followed that unexpected encounter in the park, a new routine began to take shape in my life. Lily's presence became a beacon of light amid the darkness that had long surrounded me. Each passing morning, I awaited her eagerly, anxious to see her smile and hear her childlike laughter. Our friendship blossomed at a pace I never thought possible. The solidity of my routine, which once felt like a safe haven, was now becoming suffocating, a prison I had built for myself. Lily had a way of reminding me what it meant to truly live. She carried with her an innocence I had lost long ago. The way she viewed the world, brimming with curiosity and wonder, was almost contagious. I often found myself watching her explore the city as if it were a new territory to be discovered. She delighted in the little things, a singing bird, a flower sprouting between the cracks in the sidewalk, or the sun's reflection shimmering on the windows of buildings. Each day brought something new and wonderful, and I began to understand that life was so much more than the shadows I had allowed to dominate me. On one of those days, as we walked down one of the busiest streets in the city, Lily stopped in front of a street artist who was drawing portraits with impressive talent. Her eyes sparkled at the sight of the colors and shapes coming to life on the paper. I watched her closely, noticing how her heart raced with each stroke the artist made. She seemed so alive, so full of dreams. In that moment, I realized that, despite her difficult life, she still nurtured an unwavering hope that she could be someone, that she could create something that would leave her mark on the world. That scene touched my heart deeply. I knew her only as the little beggar who had unexpectedly become a part of my life, but in that moment, I saw the artist she truly was. The idea that she dreamed of being an artist, yet life on the streets held her back, was a weight I could not ignore. My own story of success felt so empty compared to her determination. What had I done to deserve the fortune I had? I had lost the meaning of living, while she, even in the hardest circumstances, still dreamed. The promise of helping her realize her aspirations began to form in my mind. I knew I needed to do more than just spend time with her. Lily deserved a chance to express herself, to show the world what she could create. My heart was set on supporting her, and perhaps in doing so, I could find my own redemption. In the days that followed, our friendship deepened even further. I took her to museums, art galleries, and even cafes where local artists gathered. Lily absorbed everything like a sponge, each new experience fueling her imagination. I encouraged her to draw, even if it was just in a simple notebook I had bought for her. Sometimes, we would sit on park benches, and she would pull the notebook from her backpack, sketching everything she saw, the people, the buildings, even the birds flying above us. There was something so pure about her talent, something I had never witnessed before. One afternoon, in a small art gallery showcasing emerging artists, Lily was mesmerized by the exhibited works. I watched her, realizing how her breath quickened as she encountered those creations. It was as if each painting told a story, and she was desperate to hear every one of them. Beside her, I felt a wave of emotion. That little girl, who had once been merely a shadow on the street, was now transforming into a creative force. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was willing to do whatever it took to help her achieve her dreams. As our friendship grew, I noticed the barriers I had built over the years beginning to crumble. I felt lighter, more open. Each laugh from Lily was like a balm, healing wounds I thought would never close. Sometimes, as we walked, I found myself thinking about how life could have been different if I had made other choices, if I had valued the little things. Lily taught me that true wealth was not measured in money or possessions, but in the connections we make with others and the experiences we share. In one of those moments of reflection, while watching the sunset from a hilltop, Lily told me more about her dreams. She spoke with such passion about the art she wanted to create, the stories she wished to tell through her paintings. The way her eyes lit up as she described her ideas was a sight I would never forget. It was as if, in discussing her dreams, she was bringing to life a part of me that had been dormant for so long. I knew I needed to do more than just listen. I decided it was time to take action. My mind was filled with plans. I wanted to take her to an art gallery where she could showcase her talent, where she could be seen by people who could support her journey. It wasn't just about giving her an opportunity, it was about helping her believe in herself. What I wished most was that, when she looked at her creations, she could see how special she was, how much she deserved to shine. With my heart full of determination, I began to outline a plan. The idea of creating a space for her to exhibit her work started to take shape in my mind. I wanted her to know that even if challenges lay ahead, she was not alone. I was there, by her side, ready to help her face whatever it took. In that moment, I thought that perhaps, just perhaps, I was beginning to understand what it meant to be a family. It wasn't just about blood ties, but about support, love, and the ability to lift each other up. Richard Montgomery, the lonely millionaire, was transforming into a friend, a mentor. And as I watched Lily lose herself in her dreams, I realized that she could teach me more about life than I could have ever imagined. Life, after all, was a blank canvas, and we were about to color that canvas together. The warmth of the sun was beginning to fade as I decided it was time to push Lily out of her comfort zone. The idea of organizing an art exhibition for her buzzed in my mind. I knew her talent was extraordinary, and as an art lover, I could not let her gift remain in the shadows. Through our days together, I realized that each stroke she made on a sheet of paper was like a cry for freedom, an expression that longed to be heard. When I saw her draw for the first time, something ignited within me. It was her small but agile hands that brought to life the colors of a world she wanted to explore, a blend of hope and pain, of dreams and realities. That afternoon, as we walked through the city streets, the idea of the exhibition became clearer in my mind. I envisioned a gallery filled with light, where each of Lily's paintings could be displayed, where her works could tell her story, a story I wanted to help reveal. With a heart full of expectation, I began to sketch plans, thinking about how I could transform her life with this gesture. What could be a simple art event might be the first step toward her stepping off the streets and becoming the artist she had always dreamed of being. With each meeting with Lily, my admiration for her grew. Her worldview was unique, and her stories about life on the streets were shared with a raw sincerity that touched me deeply. She didn't just draw, she captured the essence of life, and that made me feel that, somehow, I was also being healed through her. The loneliness that had once consumed me now seemed like a distant echo, shaped by the light she brought into my days. But, as in any story, a shadow loomed over us. One day, while we were having coffee at a small, cozy cafe, a friend of mine, Mark, appeared unexpectedly. He was one of those friends who always seemed to know everything that was going on, and his presence at that moment sent a chill down my spine. He had a way of looking at me that made me feel like something was about to change. And it did. Mark, with his serious tone and low voice, began to tell me about Lily's past, something I never wanted to hear. He mentioned a group of people she had been involved with, insinuating that her past might not be as innocent as it seemed. His words penetrated my mind like poison, making me question everything I had built up until that moment. The laughter and smiles we had shared were replaced by a weight that settled in my chest, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. I tried to ignore Mark's words, to reject the idea that Lily could have a stained past. She was a child, an artist, someone who needed support and not condemnation. But doubt began to creep in, a persistent whisper that followed me with every step. Could I really trust her? The idea of an exhibition, of a bright future, was now tainted by this new information. What to do? That night, as I looked out the window of my apartment, the illuminated city stretched before me. Cars passed, lights shone, but everything felt dull. I found myself in a dilemma. The friendship that had blossomed between us was at risk. The worry of protecting my reputation and my world from what could become a scandal mixed with the desire to support Lily, to believe in her. The scale of morality seemed to tip in Mark's favor, but my heart insisted on staying with Lily. The next day, as we walked through the park, a heavy silence hung between us. I wanted to ask, I wanted to know the truth about her past, but something held me back. Her gaze, filled with innocence and curiosity, disarmed me. What would I say? How could I confront her without hurting her? And what if her answers weren't what I wanted to hear? The fear of losing the friendship I valued so much loomed like a monster in my mind. When I finally decided that I needed to be honest, I thought it would be easier to approach her subtly. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw the light she radiated, and I found myself hesitating. The idea that her life could be different, that she deserved a chance, kept me from moving forward. So instead of confronting her, I decided the best approach would be to continue supporting her art, giving her the space and freedom she needed to express herself. However, as the days passed and uncertainty grew, the idea of the exhibition began to seem less viable. The weight of what I knew held me back. I wanted to believe that by giving her this opportunity, I would be helping to shape a better future. But how could I do that if the shadow of her past still hovered over us? The dilemma became increasingly unbearable. When Lily began working on new pieces, I noticed that her passion was stronger than ever. She spoke about her dreams of becoming an artist with an intensity that left me speechless. She drew with vibrant energy, and each new creation seemed to be an attempt to free herself from the shackles life had imposed on her. It was a silent struggle, but one I wanted to support. The desire to help her was strong, but the doubt about her past continued to haunt me. I decided then that I needed to confront her. I needed to understand who she really was, whether the friendship we had built was based on a deception or if there was a deeper truth that deserved to be revealed. But at the same time, the fear of losing everything we had built together paralyzed me. On a sunny afternoon, as we walked through one of our favorite spots, I sat on a bench and looked at her. The sun illuminated her face, and in that moment, I realized that the light she emanated was the only thing that really mattered. Yet the weight of doubt still troubled me, like a dark cloud I couldn't dispel. What would I do when I finally confronted Lily? The truth could be a devastating blow, not just for me, but for her as well. As the day progressed, I realized I needed to find the courage to face the situation. But with every step I took, the idea that I might be losing a precious friendship made me hesitate. The battle between heart and reason echoed within me, and I knew that, at some point, I would need to choose a path. Lily's life depended on this, and I deeply wished that our friendship could withstand any storm. The tension hung in the air, like a dark cloud ready to burst. I watched Lily, with her sad and confused expression, while the reality of my dilemma engulfed me. The friendship we had built over the past few weeks now seemed at risk, and I didn't know how to handle it. My heart, which had been locked away and isolated for so long, began to feel the weight of the guilt growing inside me. Lily didn't deserve this uncertainty, but I couldn't ignore my friend's warnings about her past. Those words echoed in my mind, making me hesitate in my deepest instincts. When I decided to distance myself from Lily, a part of me hoped she would understand. I wanted her to know that this wasn't about a lack of trust but rather a paralyzing fear that consumed me. I didn't know what it truly meant to trust someone again. After my wife's death, the world seemed to have lost all its brightness, and now, when the light of Lily illuminated my path, I found myself on the brink of an abyss. The idea that she might be connected to something dark left me in a constant state of vigilance. What did I really know about her? What would happen if I let myself be carried away and she disappointed me? The pain of loss was still fresh, and the fear that a new friendship could end in disillusionment paralyzed me. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to grow more distant. The look that once sparkled with hope was now overshadowed by a shadow of distrust. She began to pull away, and I could feel her pain as if it were an extension of my own. Seeing the sadness on her face was like looking into a mirror that reflected my own loneliness and regret. My days became filled with unbearable anguish, a sensation that I had lost something precious that could never be recovered. The city around me continued to spin in its frantic routine, but to me, everything seemed like a blur without meaning. The nights were the hardest. I would sit at the kitchen table, the soft light of the lamp casting dancing shadows on the white walls. The silence echoed like a deafening scream, every corner of the house reminding me of Lily, of her laughter, her stories about life on the streets, and how she dreamed of becoming an artist. I felt like a fool for letting fear guide me, for allowing insecurities to obscure the beauty of our friendship. I remember one particular night when I picked up the old camera I used to capture precious moments with my wife. My heart tightened at the sight of the photos of her, smiling, full of life. I no longer wanted to live only on memories, I wanted to create new ones, but the doubt about Lily held me back from taking that step. It was on one of those sleepless nights that I made the decision to look for her. The idea gave me a new purpose, a small glimmer of hope amid despair. I needed to see her again, to understand her pain, and perhaps find a way to correct my mistake. The chill of dawn enveloped me as I left my apartment. The city was quiet, and the moonlight reflected off the deserted streets, like a guide leading me to Lily. The path I had traveled many times now felt distant, as if I were journeying through a labyrinth of uncertainties. Memories of our past encounters were fresh in my mind, and each step took me to a place that was once filled with joy. I remembered the first time I saw her in the park, her curious gaze, and the hesitation she showed when I asked her to pretend to be my daughter. The image of her, with eyes shining with hope and dreams, was the driving force guiding me. I needed to find that young girl with a pure heart, to apologize, and perhaps offer her a new chance. Finally, I arrived at the shelter where I knew Lily often sought refuge. The place was simple and welcoming, but the atmosphere was heavy. I could feel the sadness embedded in the walls, and every person who crossed my path seemed to carry the weight of their own battles. My eyes landed on a corner where some children sat, drawing on sheets of paper. The scene reminded me of how much Lily loved art, and a lump formed in my throat. I didn't know how she would react to seeing me, but the need for reconciliation was stronger than my fear. With my heart racing, I entered the shelter. The smell of the place was a mix of home-cooked food and disinfectant, a reminder of the ongoing effort to provide a little comfort to those seeking shelter. The soft murmur of conversations in the background blended with the sound of children's laughter, creating a melody that somehow calmed my restless mind. I approached the area where people gathered, trying to see if Lily was around. Hope grew in my chest, but the fear of encountering her and not being welcome consumed me. And then I saw her. Lily was sitting in a corner, with a notebook on her lap, her eyes fixed on a blank page. Her unkempt hair fell over her forehead, and I could see the trace of a sad smile on her lips. My heart raced at the sight of her, and a deep desire to hug her washed over me. However, I hesitated. What would I say? How could I explain the pain I had caused? Before I could form any words, she looked up, and our gazes met. The world around us seemed to disappear, and for a brief moment, all that mattered was that instant. Lily seemed surprised to see me, and in her eyes was a mixture of emotions. I could feel her hesitation, the doubt that permeated her being. But at the same time, there was a spark of hope, as if she wanted to believe that I was there for something good. Approaching slowly, the knot in my throat tightened. I didn't have enough words to express what I felt, but I knew I had to try. With a hesitant movement, I extended my arms and pulled her into an embrace, feeling her small, fragile body against mine. The warmth of her body was comforting, and in that moment, I knew I was willing to face anything to not lose the chance of having her in my life again. The thoughts that tormented me dissipated, and a new determination filled my being. I no longer wanted to live in fear. Lily deserved the chance to shine, and I was willing to be the support she needed. The road ahead would not be easy, but the thought of rebuilding our friendship filled me with hope. Life without her was unbearable, and I couldn't let the past define our future. With that in mind, I hugged her tighter, determined to do everything in my power to show her that true wealth lies in the friendship and love we can share. The shelter where I found Lily was more crowded than I expected. The smell of simple food and the murmur of conversations filled the space, creating a symphony of voices that intertwined in a welcoming atmosphere, albeit marked by the harshness of life on the streets. My heart raced when I saw her small body, wrapped in a tattered blanket, sitting in a corner. She looked so vulnerable, so far from the little girl full of dreams I had met just days before. I stepped forward slowly, each step heavy with expectation and trepidation. When our eyes met, a mix of relief and pain washed over me. I approached, and the world around us seemed to fade away. The noise, the voices, everything blurred in an instant. I hugged her, pulling her close to me. It was a simple act but laden with meaning. The feeling of her against my chest, the warmth of her body made me feel that, for a moment, everything was right. I silently apologized, feeling moisture in my eyes. I realized that Lily's absence had left an immense void in my life, a space I hadn't known existed until that moment. The weight of loneliness I had carried since my wife's death felt even more unbearable without her presence. She looked into my eyes, and I saw a spark I hadn't expected to find. It wasn't just happiness at being back, it was the understanding that forgiveness is a powerful choice. That little girl, who had been through so much yet still held a flame of hope, was willing to accept me again. The world around us could be cruel, but there, in that embrace, I felt that everything could be different. It was as if, by forgiving me, she was also giving me a second chance. After a while, we pulled away, and Lily smiled, a shy but sincere smile. The shelter was filled with people like her, facing unimaginable challenges. I couldn't just leave her there, without a plan, without a future. Looking at her, I noticed that the light that had ignited inside me still shone bright, and now I wanted that light to illuminate the path for other children who, like Lily, needed a chance. We decided it was time to take action. Together, we began to dream out loud about creating a foundation. The idea of combining our talents seemed magical. Lily, with her art, and I, with the resources I had, could create something meaningful. Deep down, I wanted her to know that life could be more than just survival. It was a profound wish for her to flourish and for other children to find the same path. The conversation flowed naturally, as if we were sketching a future together, and every word we exchanged was a step toward a new beginning. The foundation we envisioned wouldn't just be an institution, it would be a refuge, a temporary home for those children who, like Lily, sought a better future. The power of art and generosity could unite to transform lives. The walls that had once been cold and impersonal could be filled with color and life. Lily could teach painting, music, dance, any form of expression that allowed the children to free themselves from their anguish. And I, with my contacts and resources, would seek support from other entrepreneurs and artists. The idea grew like a flame, and as we spoke, hope became tangible. I saw the determination in Lily's eyes, and it made me believe that it was possible. She, a small homeless girl who had become an artist, had the power to inspire other children to dream. And I, a lonely millionaire finding purpose on a new path, could be the support she needed. The day of the foundation's inauguration arrived faster than I expected. The space we chose had large windows that let the sunlight in, creating a welcoming environment. There were paintings hanging on the walls, works of art created by Lily, and each one told a story of struggle and triumph. The children she had taught were there, with wide smiles and bright eyes, and the energy in the air was electric. When Lily finally presented herself, I was in the audience, my heart racing. She looked like a true artist, confidence radiating from every movement. The way she held the brush, the way she looked at the canvas, everything felt magical. I knew she wasn't just painting, she was expressing herself, showing the world the colors of her soul. And in that moment, I realized that the true legacy I could leave for her wasn't money, but love and hope. The inauguration was a success. Friends, acquaintances, and admirers gathered to support the cause, and the laughter of the children filled the space. I looked at Lily, who was surrounded by people admiring her. She had become a central figure, not only for me but for everyone there. The warmth in my heart was indescribable. It felt as if the pain of loneliness I had carried for so long was dissipating, replaced by a feeling of belonging. At the end of the event, I looked at Lily and realized that despite all the hardships we had faced, we were united by something greater. The friendship that had emerged in an unusual way was now an unbreakable bond. Life had taught us valuable lessons, and together, we were ready to face any challenge. As we watched the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, I understood that the future was promising. Richard and Lily, a millionaire and an artist, united by a purpose. And deep down, I knew we were just beginning our journey. The true wealth wasn't in material possessions, but in the relationships we cultivate and the love we give and receive. The legacy I would leave for Lily would be the certainty that, no matter how dark the night may seem, there will always be a new dawn illuminated by hope.